Welcome to the Farm Bits Podcast, a product of Nebraska Extension Digital Agriculture. I'm Jackson Stansel.
And I'm Samantha Teaton.
And we come to you each week to discuss the trends, the realities, and the value of digital agriculture.
Through interviews and panels with experts, producers, and innovators from all sectors of digital technology, we hope that you step away from each episode with new practical knowledge of digital agriculture technology. This episode of the Farm Bits Podcast is our first farmer-focused episode, and we are very excited about it. We plan to incorporate farmer-focused episodes often over the course of this podcast, both as a way to expose you to the contemporary technologies and to provide a broader perspective of how farmers view digital agriculture in Nebraska.
As you know, if you've listened to our previous two episodes, we are focusing on harvest right now. Today we are joined by farmers from 3 operations in Nebraska.
Angela Knuth is a member of a 4th-generation farming family that farms around Wahoo, Nebraska. She is the precision technology manager in the operation that she shares with her husband and 2 sons.
Our second farmer, John Oler King, farms non-irrigated corn and soybeans near Elmwood, Nebraska, where he also raises pumpkins as a seasonal business. Also joining us for this Farmer Focus episode are Phil and John Christensen, who farm together near Aurora, Nebraska, following in their father's footsteps.
As you will see in this episode, while these farmers all share a lot in common, they also have different perspectives and experiences that have shaped how they use digital agriculture in their operations.
First, we will discuss operational aspects of harvest, then we will delve into yield data management and utilization, and conclude by discussing future technologies for harvest operations.
Now let's get started with this Farmer Focus episode.
We will begin this episode hearing from John Oler King discussing his biggest operational challenges during harvest while making efficient use of his time interviewing with Samantha while operating the grain cart.
Biggest operational challenge during harvest, probably labor. And unfortunately, I'm fortunate right now I have some people that can help me. My father, 87, still does some. My father-in-law is retired, semi-retired, is helping, and I have another neighbor that I farm for who helps out once in a while too. But in a few years, once they're gone, it'll be me, and I'll be pretty dependent on my son, who's 16 right now. But I'd say labor is the operational challenge.
Similarly, the Christensens also perceive their biggest challenge being logistics and labor management.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just your operational and logistics challenges, and some of it's just labor and having enough people, or you're kind of making do with what you have for help on any given day, and a lot of it, I guess, is like you're kind of alluding to, is that the sending trucks to the elevator, how long is that trip going to take? And we kind of utilize our smartphones there typically to kind of see where the guy with the truck is at, and whether he's close to returning from the elevator or a ways off, or that sort of thing.
If everyone kind of knows what's happening as far as where trucks are, where whether the grain carts are full, that helps everyone do a better job, because they can always be thinking about what is the next step. How do we keep the combine moving?
For the Knuth Farms operation, Angela sees logistics, particularly related to time and efficiency, to be their biggest challenge.
Because harvest is so intense, there's so much equipment involved, people involved, logistics, and they're long days. So how do you fit in the rest of your life? Especially if you have animals. How do you get those done? How do you get enough rest? I'm out there with them. The boys are out there. Do you have your meals ready? All those external things are the hardest because something doesn't get done. People can be on edge. It's just a lot going on. So
Yeah.
Generally, we've got covers to put in, soil sampling to get. We do all that, in house. So it's like, yeah. So the goal is to never have the combine stop. Always going. And the timing of that is, I mean, that's a challenge, but it's fun when it's humming. Because that get a load, get to that truck. I mean, I can unload and just be gone, and he never has to stop.
As farmers do with most challenges they face, these farmers have been resourceful with existing tools to develop methods for overcoming their harvest challenges. They're also thoughtful about potential technological improvements that would be helpful in solving their challenges. The Christiansens shared that they have been piecing together free apps to help manage their harvest logistics.
Right now, we're kind of piecing together that information using Life 360, using the co-ops app, using the cell phone an awful lot, using the radios in the combine and the grain cart to try and communicate with each other. But if we had an app, that was always updating people's positions, wait times for trucks.
You can kind of get into the delivery information there with, what did the scale ticket say in terms of moisture and weight?
We're using Life 360 to track the truck operator and determine whether he's in town at the elevator, whether he's coming back. One of the pieces of information that's kind of missing from that is it would be nice to know how long he's going to be at the elevator. It would sure help when we're making decisions as to whether we haul to town that day or if we're going to haul the corn into our own on-farm storage on that particular day. A lot of the apps and that we're using are free apps. We're using Life 360. We talked a little bit about using Slack. We use that just to keep notes of calibrations. If we change calibration in the combine, we'll put that in Slack. That becomes handy because in the next year when we go back and say, hey, what was our calibration last year? We can go back a year later and say, okay, this is what it was. Yeah, that seems consistent with what we're doing now. We'll keep track of GPS shifts in there if we have a field that's shifted on the guidance tracks one way or another. So a lot of what we're using is free. And just piecing that all together to make everything work.
Similarly, John would like to be able to have more remote monitoring, tracking, and control technologies, particularly for combine settings and grain transportation.
One of the things I'd like to see, and it probably is available, I'd like to be, I know you can monitor the combine, certain things with the combine from a remote location. I'd like to be able to make those adjustments from a remote location. There's a lot of times if I have somebody in the combine that's not familiar with it, they know how to run the basics but not setting it, and now the combines will set themselves. They've adjusted that, or they've done those things. But I would like to see, I could control it from the iPad and just kind of monitor some things there and make that adjustment from when I'm away and not have to try and explain it over the phone.
Yeah.
It would be nice to be able to track, and they are doing a little bit now with, they have an app with the co-op that will tell me when that truck gets there and when it's dumped and when it's back, and tells me all the information, so I can kind of track it that way. But it'd be nice going ahead knowing being able to see the line, and I'm sure with a request or two they could put up a camera, a guy could log on and see it, or if they had some way of tracking what your wait time is going to be ahead of time before you send the truck, so if you want to send it to a different place.
The Christiansens believe the solution to this problem might come through crowdsourcing technologies similar to modern navigation software.
It would depend on, either kind of, information provided by the, ethanol plants or the, the elevators themselves in terms of weight, or, kind of, crowdsourced type of, information there where you've got various operators in the area where, sharing, I arrived at the elevator at X time and I left it at X time, and being willing to kind of share that between different farmers. And
it's similar to what Google Maps does with traffic. Yeah. That'd be a potential future application of that kind of technology, is to
estimate wait times and that sort of thing. And I guess we've kind of seen work in that area before, but I don't think there's anything commercially available right now that does something like that.
For Knuth Farms, intensive spreadsheets help them to manage load, inventory, marketing, and transportation decisions during harvest.
We have a pretty intense spreadsheet, like I mentioned, that tracks. I mean, it's the date, time, load on the cart. If it's wet, moisture, shrink already calculated, and then what truck it's on, where it's going to, and then we have a summary sheet for each field by truck, where it's at, and then dry down. So we know when we're done harvesting that field, we know exactly how much we have in each field, and then we have a summary page for all the fields that shows where every bushel is and total bushels and shrink and all.
So you're using that for your inventory management, or using it for like marketing of your grain, or helping make those decisions?
Yeah. And Carrie, as you mentioned earlier, we don't have enough storage for all of our grain. So he's got to market some ahead of time, and then that helps knowing what load needs to go where. And if the elevators are slow, that slows us down. It's like, no, we have to know what our bin situation is.
In addition to their use of spreadsheets, they have started using more integrated telematic technologies to improve their efficiencies and manage labor, grain transportation, and spatial harvest decisions.
We've played around a little bit with how you should harvest a field, to make it more efficient. Because if the elevator is really slow, that's one thing with Farm Mobile that helps us a lot. So Kerry's got that in his cab, so he can see where the truck drivers are. And so if they're back further in the line, he knows that he has time to go do the not so efficient parts of the field, so that when they come, he's got a load, but then he can get another load real fast for the next guy that's coming. So it's like being able to visually see where people are at, because we have mobile phones, but for some reason, all of a sudden they're not used when you're sitting in line.
Yep.
To tell, and we have two ways, but sometimes the truckers just don't.
So how is Farm Mobile doing that? Is there like a puck in each truck?
Yep, puck in a truck.
That's awesome. And then it maps it for...
it's a real-time tracking of where they're at.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so if you use the satellite imagery view, he can see how far they're back. You can't see the other trucks, but you can see how far away from the weigh scale. So you know that you've got time. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, we see everything from how fast they're traveling to, just everything. So that's very helpful. We track everything we do, machine-wise, also input-wise, and people-wise. We track that and have a cost for all of that. And then what we do then is put that in, so that we do that with Farm Mobile, and we do that with Cropzilla. They share data. Farm Mobiles are telematics, and that automatically dumps into Cropzilla's CZEMA, which is basically, it's giving us a cost for each activity.
Wow.
Like that.
How much of it is you have to hand put it in versus just uploading like layers, like your planting data or whatever?
With Farm Mobile and Cropzilla, that stuff is seamless. But we still go into Cropzilla and make a field plan.
Okay.
And because the combination of those two is only machine data, whereas with Farm Mobile, I can go in and look at field data, and look at we get our yield maps from that as well. And then with Cropzilla, it's manual as far as putting in your field plan, putting in your mixes, and so that it gets a little tedious. But if you do your diligence, then we've got some really good data at the end of the year.
Getting good data is critical to getting positive results from yield data-driven management decisions. Getting a good yield monitor calibration is the first step toward ensuring good data. While this can be a challenge given the time crunch of harvest, farmers understand the importance of good calibration. For the Christensens, dialing in the calibration at the beginning of harvest and maintaining calibration throughout harvest is key.
We're focused on it on the first couple of fields, making sure everything's calibrated. But after the first couple of fields, if we're in similar moisture, if we're in similar test weight for corn, we'll stay with that calibration, but we'll just be checking it every so often. And we've got a scale in the grain cart, so we'll just call over and say, hey, I'm going to unload. Let me know what the weight was, and we'll just double check the calibration.
John Olerking also values proper calibration and emphasizes the importance of calibration assurance using post-harvest data.
There is some logic that if the data is only off, if it's off 10%, it's 10% off the whole field, but that's not good logic. It needs to be fairly exact. And so would like to do that. On the backside, just making sure tickets match with fields and then entering those and doing the same thing, correcting all that data, making sure acres are right, boundary lines are right, the yield, the bushels are correct, the moistures are correct, so that all matches up, and checking that and making sure that yield data's there and clean. We ran into a situation earlier, and this is, again, I jumped in the combine, thought it switched everything for me. It stayed with the corn head, not the bean head. So we have one field that's cutting it 20 foot wide instead of 35 foot wide. So I have all these stripes through my field. That will not be good data.
As a farmer in southeastern Nebraska, John has to deal with steep slopes and terraces, which can pose a challenge for harvest logistics and data quality.
As far as yield data, that is a problem, I think, especially combining beans. Corn, not so much. But when we're running the head that we are, and you come around the hill and you have it to where it's 2 header widths wide because the terraces are close together. If you can take full header widths, that's good data. But when you come and you're only taking 3 or 4 rows where they're not spaced equally, I don't know if it's calculating proper data necessarily or accurate. So you infer some of that a little bit. If it's 40 or 50 bushel on one side and 40, 50 or bushel on the other side, and you have an anomaly in the middle that's less, I kind of interpolate that myself and go, it probably feathers across. That's just a narrow band that we took, and it just wasn't. And that probably takes more calibrating of the yield monitor off the beginning. But I still don't know if you can get it dialed down to that much when you're measuring 35 feet and only cutting 5 feet. If it can sense that well. So that is a little bit of a challenge, is getting 100% clean data in a terrace situation.
Practicing good data storage is also key to effective data usage. Farmers have come up with a variety of practices that fit their operation, including cloud and local storage methods. Phil and John Christensen prefer cloud storage methods.
I started farming in 2008, and we started using yield mapping right away. That was the first thing that we used. And so we have yield data going back until 2008. But until there was cloud, we were just saving that onto a hard drive. In fact, I had a hard drive once that failed and had to spend $2,000 to have it recovered by someplace in California because all the yield data was on there. And so now having it on the cloud and having it upload to the cloud automatically has really made things a lot easier. It's something you don't really think about too much anymore because you finish a field, or even while you're in the field harvesting, you can see that data uploading and be able to go in there right away and start looking at it. So that's been useful.
Dealing with a lot of data can be a challenge, but for Angela Knuth, her priority is local storage where she can control transfer, modification, and access.
I mean, we got a lot of data, and I just don't, we've got hard drives full, and I've had raids in the past, and they've crashed, or they were shut off, and then it does, they puts the data in multiple drives, and then if it doesn't start up right. So it's tricky, but it needs to be done.
Yeah.
I usually store it on 2 different hard drives. And I have it in software packages, but I don't really store it remotely yet. So that's what we do. But I got to get organized. There's just, storage-wise, I just don't know which way to go yet. And we're pretty organized. We just need, we have a lot on Google Drive and like that. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do either, but it's easy.
Data compatibility is a major challenge, particularly with machine data.
It'd be nice if everything interfaced across the board. I would say if you could go from, if it were colorblind, the ISO stuff is supposed to do it, but that's a nightmare. I've worked with that. It would be nice if those things were all somewhat compatible. It'd be nice if not everybody was so proprietary with everything. It's like certain information gets locked into some place and then it costs an arm and a leg to get it back out. If those systems could talk, or if there was a place for it to talk.
John Olerking has overcome this challenge using Climate Corporation's Fieldvue program.
The one I like the best probably is the Fieldvue. Have been on board with that since the beginning, and just the simplicity of it. I like the stuff you can do in the yield monitors, but it takes more time. It's removing the card, getting it to the computer. I get lackadaisical with that, so I wait until the end of the season and then find out half my data's missing because the card didn't write correctly. With the Fieldvue, it may not be as sophisticated in some respects at this point, but if I see it on the screen, I know it's logging to the iPad or to the cloud, and I know I have it wherever I want to look at it in the future. So that's been really helpful.
Fieldvue also provides multiple useful analysis to John Olerking in a user-friendly, easy, comprehensible format.
One, it's just to see the performance of the hybrid in the field. And what we've done to try and improve yield goals. So we'll look at the field and see, is our fertilizer program working? Is it where are our weak spots in the field? How can we improve that? Those things. One of the other things that's really nice is, like with the Fieldvue, I can just hit the button and print my acreage and yield reports right to the crop insurance company. I don't have to spend a lot of time doing that. I can go to FSA then as well. So the yield data is basically just analytical at this point, seeing what we need to improve and how we did over the year, and I guess that's a lot of it. With the yield data.
And you mentioned using it for prescription maps. Like, are you doing a lot of variable rate seeding?
All my corn is variable rate seeding. The soybeans this year I didn't do any variable rate. But all the corn ones are done with variable rate populations, and I do generate those off of the yield maps and satellite data.
John has found Fieldvue's prescription generation algorithms helpful for everything from nutrient applications to seeding.
I've used it to create nitrogen scripts. I've used it to create population scripts for planting, tracking, where I've sprayed different things, test trials and varieties and hybrids, planting dates. It's kind of my little pocketbook that a lot of guys used to carry. And it's nice because I can access it from anywhere in the world at any time. So, and anybody else can that I give permission to. So that's kind of nice.
And then it also does some simple analysis of like different hybrids performing on different soil types and things like that, right?
Correct. Yeah, it gathers a lot of information and aggregates it and separates it how you want. And there's probably a few features that can be enhanced, but for the most part, it really does a nice job, and it's user friendly. That's the really nice thing about it is most anybody who can run around the iPad can figure out what they want to find. And you don't need a computer science degree to get it there and analyze the information. So you can do their automatic script and just go off of that if you want to. And then within that automatic script, there's a low, a medium, and a high, or there's 5 settings in there, and you can go within that range. If that still doesn't satisfy you, you can break off from that and change those numbers manually and do it that way. How they're coming up with it, I don't know that other than just a lot of aggregated data that they've got, because they are able to see all that data from every grower over different fields, soil types. They've got all that in the system. It then starts to generate the populations and the yield goals from that.
The Christiansens have found value in having real-time data via the John Deere Operations Center.
Well, we use the My John Deere, the operations app in the combine, and so when we're running it, well, a lot of times we'll have the variety map pulled up from planting, so we can see where in the field certain hybrids and varieties are planted. We'll also pull up the harvest data from years previous, so that we can, if we're in a particular area of the field and we're seeing lower yields or higher yields, we can look back at previous year's yield information and see whether it's a pattern or if it's just a one-time dip or spike in yield.
They also use John Deere's Apex program for generating variable rate prescriptions based on their yield data.
When we're creating our prescriptions for seeding rate, we usually use our yield data from the previous year or the previous several years. We usually are just creating usually just an irrigated rate and a dry land rate. But what we found is that it's not always just what's under the pivot. A lot of times in a field we might have a little bit of runoff from the pivot that actually irrigates the portion of the field that's downhill, and so we'll include that in our irrigated area. And so when we're creating prescription maps, we're basically just tracing around previous years' yield data to create those prescriptions.
Angela Knuth is exploring AgSolver as a program for helping to determine spatial ROI in making farming practice decisions.
So with the yield maps, like in the past, we had used the yield maps to make variable rate nutrient applications.
Okay.
So we use those heavily. But going forward, trying to get to the point where, have you heard of AgSolver?
No.
It's a software
that
will take your yield data plus all your cost of production and then give you a cost of return on ROI, whatever, on each acre.
Wow, for all your inputs and then your yield. Wow.
Yeah, that's where we need to get to. I would like to use that to farm it some acres a little different.
Comparing input application programs is particularly important in their operation.
We look at each input and how much it costs in there. Our product mixes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got each one in there and what that costs us. Because, Carrie's got different programs, like there's a one-pass program versus a two. What is the cost difference on that?
Yep. Cropzilla has also proven to be a useful program for scenario modeling, which is helping with financial decisions for the Knuth Farms operation.
Well, like with Cropzilla itself, we can do a lot of scenario building. Like last winter, the question was, do we buy a bunning spreader or do we just rent it? And we did the numbers, and it's like, you don't buy it, you can rent it, and it'll work better. So I guess our goals with the data is the return on investment, and then also, what do I want to say? The healthy soil movement, and the critters in the soil, the biology and all that. It's like, what is the impact of the inputs that we're putting on there? How do we measure that? That's hard.
Yes.
The equipment, is the equipment the right size and for the fields? We actually are oversized. We know that. But efficiencies are pretty good, but the return, because of the cost of the size of our tractor, the size of our combine, you can be really efficient, but if the market isn't paying you for it, you have to take a hard look, and we're looking at things like that.
The Christiansens have even found ways of using multi-year yield data to spatially identify potential pest pressure and unexplained variability.
We've seen in the past, I think we've kind of picked up on a few fields where what we think is a uniform area of the field but for some reason we're seeing a dip in yield, we'll go back and look at that yield data from the previous year and several years back, and we'll be able to see that there's a trend. And in one case, I think we determined that we had nematodes in that area, and we were seeing lower bean yields.
Yeah.
We kind of noticed that there was this area of the field that was pretty small to begin with, and well, we didn't notice it those first couple of years, but then maybe in the third year, we started to notice that area was getting bigger, and then we went and looked back at the previous yield data, and we said, okay, there's something going on here that's not explained by the the topology of the
Topology, fertility, or anything like that. Yeah.
New opportunities for ecosystem services and programs also require extensive data reporting, including yield data.
Last winter I spent getting information ready for organic certification and NORI, which is a carbon network that, they pay us for storing carbon. And that was really intense because they wanted data from way back from 2000. They wanted all your field activities. So which actually they coincide, the organic and the carbon coincided really well together, but that took up all my time.
While programs using a cloud-based storage method can automate the data compilation process, farmers like Angela may prefer an automated process that is compatible with their local storage preferences.
How to pull it in together with not so much hands-on, I don't know. If we could work with software developers for APIs we could dump data in and then they would just pull it in. I mean, we have it a certain way. You guys talk to us about how's our data, how's it set up, and then make an API so that you can just upload it and do the magic then. We just don't have time to do all this, especially now that with these ecosystem services and organics, there's so much more recording. There's a lot of recording, and it's like we just don't have. I mean, when we go out to the field, we're working with FarmOS. You've heard of them, the open platform.
Briefly.
Yeah. We're working with them for an app on the phone so that every time we go out there, we have Farm Mobile tracking us, but the little things, when, if there's a problem, why did it take you from 1 till 7 to do something that shouldn't have took that long? So just that type of recording is so important to help, especially as you get older, help you remember what went on, and it just makes decision making during the winter a lot easier when you have that data in front of you.
Similarly, data and software consolidation are immense issues for farmers trying to improve their data management systems. Having data stored locally is critical to some farmers like Angela, particularly as they are trying to determine which software works best for their operation.
Kerry has his spreadsheets. I have my spreadsheets, and then we're getting information off of software. It's, we need to consolidate.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a really common challenge. There's so many companies with so many different softwares, so many different things that it's hard to, there's not one that works for all of it. And so.
Bingo. We need something like a Google that you can have all these different modules plugging in whichever one you want, because there's multiple softwares doing the same thing, but one guy might like this one better than this one. So, but you just can't interchange. It takes forever to move data. And I've not lost data, but so there's been a couple companies that I've been with, one for a long time, and they got bought out. They didn't update, and they charged more. I'm like, I'm not doing this.
Right.
But all my stuff is on their cloud. So you have it on cards.
Right.
It either comes back to you in just static, not connected.
Right. In their form of the file where you can't use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it doesn't come back to you at all. And so one of the things that I think all software should do if they're really a friend of the farmer is let them have it back on their PC again. it's your data.
Yep.
Yeah, they should provide a PC version of it so that when they want to move, they can move in without that penalty, because that's wrong. I don't know. It just needs to be in-house, but you also have to have a backup, and then we have to be able to use whatever software we want.
For John Olerking, his biggest priorities for new technologies are usability and reliability, since support resources are sometimes limited during peak demand periods like harvest.
That's probably you asked about operational challenges before too. That was one of the reasons I went to Fieldvue, is because finding somebody to analyze the data or just to get it off and help me analyze it, those people weren't around. That's something that's really changed in the last 10 to 15 years, but it's still really a need. There's just not enough of those people around, and especially at dealerships. It used to be that they needed guys to turn wrenches. They need more guys with computers now and laptops to diagnose a lot of these problems and answer questions. So that's probably one of the things. It's just becoming more user-friendly and more people available to help with it.
Another major gap in modern software systems is integration of traditional note-taking systems with digital storage methods. As Angela previously stated, a service like Google would be beneficial with multiple modules, including potentially searchable notes.
What I'm finding is the gap that we have with our software is that so the machines don't tell you those notes that you would be writing down, and it's fine if you write it on a notebook, a little notepad, but that doesn't
match it.
It doesn't upload to the computer. It's static. It's not dynamic, and we need that. That's why we're using FarmOS, trying to catch those notes that are missed. It's layers of information, and that way, when we go and look at the Cropzilla numbers, we can put real live situation information. FarmOS is so important to get running because exactly, if the puck is not working, we lose that data. So that's why we need a second, we need second layer, or we need to overlap on that so that we don't miss anything. So, because we've had that before where the puck went bad, and so that wasn't collected and nobody kept any notes.
Right.
Yeah.
When asked about the future of data collection, particularly the value of increasing data resolution, John Olerking had this to say.
What does the future hold? I think it does. I mean, a lot of this information I'm collecting, I don't think sometimes it's going to be applicable to me. In some respects, it's more my son and the future generations. I think as technology increases, we start going to row-by-row planning or, if you will, robot planning where they're doing it individually. I think all that information becomes more pertinent. And so I think, right now somebody may say, that's not important at all to me. Well, it may not be to me, but in 10 years or 5 years, it may be really important to my son, or who knows, consumer, the purchaser, the end user, whoever may want that information. And I guess that would be cool. I'd just see some of that. And, header loss, like if you can see that per row. I mean, I don't know. There's all sorts of things that I'm sure are possible, and I just, like I said, I'm not aware of right now. So.
John also expounded upon the value of aggregated data in the future of data utilization.
That's been the problem in the past, is everybody does a test plot and puts it on their best ground.
Right. So
is it really realistic data? It's more than likely no. So when you get full field data, I mean, the field we're in now is 270 acres. If they can pull that data in, that's a pretty good representation of what this particular variety is doing in this type of weather year. You get, like I said, it may not be so much beneficial to me, but my son or my grandson, after they have another 30, 40 years of data collected, might be really, really key.
The Christiansens are beginning to explore Corteva's Granular platform for understanding their operations performance.
We, have been using Granular here this past year, but we really haven't explored how that's going to kind of integrate with our harvest operations yet. And if that's, I think we both kind of hope that would be a useful tool in the cab, but I guess we haven't got there yet.
Angela Knuth has explored both Granular and Fieldvue and provides another perspective based on their fit in her operation.
We tried both of them because you gotta see what's out there. I'm concerned about what they're making on the backside of it, and I'm also concerned with farmers not. I'm concerned with farmers farming those tasks out too much because it seems like like you hear a lot with the input dealers around here. It's like let us do your yield maps and we'll tell you what you need to put on there. It's like so what are we? Are we just serfs? It's like let's do your own homework, and that's what I fear with the companies that just sweep away your data and then they give you a report, but it's like, no, I don't want some big company coming and saying, hey, we'll take care of all your problems for you. It's like, no, we want help, but we don't want you to be in control. Again, I just worry about once, because like I said, it's happened twice where your data, if it comes back to you, it's not usable again. And that's where it's like you need to be able to, move it from one piece of software to the other. And that's why Farm Mobile and Cropzilla are so nice, because they're talking to each other. They have no problem with that. It makes them stronger.
Yeah.
Similarly, while Angela sees the value of the cloud, she prioritizes data redundancy through local storage. She is still looking for the right data storage offering for farmers.
And then the moving to the cloud is good, but I think it's taken. It's like, how do I say it? I wish there was a independent, just a storage that farmers. I know they're out there like CBW and all them, and ASUS. So I wish there was a place, and I've talked to a guy. His same idea, where farmers could store their data again, but it could be pieced out with the blockchain, and plus you could bring it into any software you want, but it's stored off site as well as what you have like on your PC. If you have just 1 year or if you keep 5 years of data, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
Blockchain is a particularly interesting technology Angela mentioned, which has implications for protecting financial contracts and other important information like agricultural data. The potential for blockchain's impact in agriculture may be a future topic of this podcast, but for now you should understand blockchain as a ledger of mathematically linked records or transactions that is distributed digitally amongst all participants on the ledger. Any record added to the ledger is instantly observable by all parties and must remain unchanged as it is secured through the linkages. This is essentially like nesting glass safes inside of each other and needing to know the codes of every interior safe to open the exterior safe. That's not a perfect analogy, but hopefully it helps to create a picture of the blockchain.
With blockchain, we should be using that to tag our data, and then anytime someone wants to use it, they have to buy it each time.
Yep.
Put it out there. They can have it, but they got to pay for it. And they only get it every time they use it. If they use it in this market, and then they use it in this market, they have to pay each time.
Phil and John Christensen's biggest advice for other farmers looking to invest in new technologies is to invest in and use cloud-based services.
If they do have the capability with their machinery to have the data uploaded to the cloud, that is pretty handy. It is, and especially then being able to use an app in the combine or the grain cart operator wants to see what hybrid are we in now. That's putting those to use. If you have it already and maybe you're not using it, it's useful to use.
When asked for his biggest piece of advice, John Olerking suggested these technologies that are relevant to harvest operations.
One of the first ones that was probably a big money saver and time saver for us and yield increaser was row shutoffs on the planter. That's a simple technology. If a guy doesn't have that on his planter or drill, that's a must. The next one would be yield data, or collecting yield data. If you're going to go to if you want to know what your farm's doing and really want to improve, I think you need to have data to do, and you've got to be able to do that. So I think that's important. You've got to be able to get that and get it in a format that you can understand and can work with. That was one of the problems, as I said before. You get it out, you get somebody to print it, and then you're like, what do I do with it? So that was, I probably lost 10 years on that, just trying to find that. Fieldvue, there are some things that you can do with that program just with the touch of a finger, that you can singulate out a specific part of the field. It will tell you how many acres that is, what the yield was in that particular area, and that's stuff that took hours before on a computer. But I do think that's one, if a farmer is going to get started, if you're going to look at one who have you not done a lot of technological stuff, that something like that is easy to use and farmer friendly and can get you a baseline. Then as you want to progress, as you understand it, there's other programs that probably are more sophisticated.
To Angela Knuth, the most important thing is to own and understand the value of your farm data.
Well, I really think it's important to own your data. So I would recommend keeping control of it as much as possible, whatever that entails for their farm. For us, I think it's better storage on farm and then finding a trusted neutral site. Well, like we talked about with a place where farmers could upload their data and then buyers could come and they buy each time. That's, to me, what I would recommend farmers start moving towards, because data is a new revenue stream for farmers.
Thank you to all of these farmers, John and Phil Christensen, Angela Knuth, and John Oler King, for interviewing with us. Harvest is a busy time for everyone involved in agriculture, but especially for farmers, and we appreciate them taking the time for this podcast. My favorite part of this episode was learning how each of these farmers has pieced together technologies that work for them to solve the challenges they face during harvest. Basically, these farmers are doing what computer science folks might call bootstrapping digital agriculture, which is a topic we'd like to explore more on this podcast at some point in the near future.
For me, my greatest takeaway was you need to find what works best for your operation. If data privacy and flexibility is your priority, it may take lots of spreadsheets, careful data transport, and diligent data input. But on the flip side, if there are a lot of companies that make data input very easy to use, but it may be difficult to make adjustments to this data later on. So it's just what works best for you. This Farmer Focus podcast was a great experience for us, and we hope it was for you as well. If you want your perspective to be included on a Farmer Focus podcast, don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the Farm Bits podcast.
We would like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support of this podcast and their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
If you enjoyed this episode and it sounds like something you'd listen to each week, subscribe to the podcast and set your notifications to let you know each time we release a podcast.
We would love to hear from you with your feedback. So if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email at nedigitalag@unl.edu, on Twitter at nedigitalag, or in the review section of your favorite podcast platform.
See you next week on another episode of Farm Bits.